welcome back to Chris's Fantasy Space. My name is Chris, and this is the show where I talk all about some of my favourite books. Now, usually I talk about fantasy. I will eventually get into some science fiction as well, but considering that it's October, we're nearing Halloween, I thought, why not get into some horror? Now, if you saw my first video on this topic, I've been trying to get back into Stephen King. I posted a video the other day about Carrie, Stephen King's first widely published novel. Today, as you can tell from the title, I'm going to be looking at the book Pet Sematary. Now, very similar to what I talked about with Carrie, amazingly, somehow I am totally unspoiled on this book. Obviously not now, I have finished it. I'm going to talk a little bit about it, but I managed to not watch any of the adaptations. Now, I know there was one done, I think maybe back in the 80s or the early 90s, and then there was a very recent one done maybe a year or two ago on Netflix. I'm pretty sure both of the adaptations have got quite mixed responses, so part of me is kind of glad that I haven't watched them. And actually, after I finished reading this, I did go onto YouTube and look at some of the like key scenes from it, and it did look kind of odd and weird changes to the book as well, which I don't know if they necessarily needed to be made. So why did I go into Pet Sematary? Why was this the one that I decided to read after Carrie? And the simple answer to that was I literally went onto Reddit and I thought, you know what, Stephen King, supposed to be this master of horror. What is his scariest book? And almost unanimously, everyone was saying that Pet Sematary was the one that freaked them out the most when they read it. And I thought, okay, cool, I'm game. I want to be scared. I want one of these books to come in and actually really creep me out and scare me. So Pet Sematary is what I went for. Now, as you can tell by looking at it, it's a little bit longer than Carrie. It took me a little bit longer to get... I just threw the book on the floor. Didn't mean to. I just hit the floor with it. I'll pick it up now. As we're saying, took me a little bit longer to get through this one. Actually, part of that is because I think it starts a little bit slow, this one. To give you the elevator pitch for what this is about, you've got a young family who have just moved to a new home. Big, creepy house, classic sort of thing. There's a large freeway that runs between their house and their neighbours across the road. Their elderly neighbour, Judd, becomes quite an important character, great character. So I love Judd through the book. And the main character kind of is the father of this family, who's taken a job as a doctor in a university or like a college campus, I believe. And throughout the book, I was calling him Louis in my head because his name is Louis. And then after I finished reading it, look, Louis. I don't know if you can see that. I don't know if it's gonna put it in focus or not, but yeah, Louis Creed. Is what I was calling him, and then I looked at after I finished it. I looked at some of the clips from the adaptations, and everyone was calling him Lewis. So I felt pretty stupid, but in my head he's Louis, but I'll call him Lewis in this. He has just moved his family to a new place. He's got 2 young children, a very young boy and a girl who's a little bit older, and then his wife as well. And the book is about their reaction when they find out that there is this pet cemetery. Just a short walk into the woods from their house, and there are sort of mysterious forces at play that seem to come from this pet cemetery, and there's weird powers that come with it. Like with Carrie, I don't want to spoil this. I know that obviously there's been adaptations, and it's a very well-known story, this, but again, I don't want to spoil this just in case you don't know it that well. I will, in my sort of overall views of the book, give something away to an extent, but almost as like a warning to people who might enjoy this or who might actually want to avoid this book potentially, because when I got to the end of this book, I felt quite disturbed and uneasy. So the elevator pitch, like I said, they move to this place and things start to go wrong. But like I said earlier, the first, I don't know, maybe quarter or so of this book is quite slow. And I think part of the, when I was reading it, it took me a while to get really into it. And I thought, oh, maybe me and Stephen King just aren't meant to be like I thought, which is why I wanted to get back into it, reading Carrie and then this. But actually, when you get after a third of the way in, it really starts to pick up. And actually, I found, looking back on it after finishing, that first quarter or so, where you really just get to know Lewis, the father of this family, and Judd, the elderly neighbour, and the daughter, the son, the wife, it really draws you in, and it makes where this book goes that much more disturbing and tragic and horrible. So I got, maybe a third of the way through, and it starts to pick up, and I still wasn't sure actually what was going to happen in this story. I didn't know what was going to happen in the Pet Sematary actually was. But then suddenly there comes a point where it clicked in my head, and I went, oh my gosh, I know exactly what is going to happen. And from that point on, I almost couldn't put the book down, and I finished the rest of it very, very quickly, because part of me, because I wanted to see what was going to happen, and I wanted to see what the reaction to it was going to be, and also partly because I was like, this is so horrible that I just want to get through it. It is a really disturbing story, really, really grim, without wanting to give anything away. It left me really quite shocked as to what was actually put down on the page. Part of what makes this such a disturbing read is because King doesn't kind of over describe things. He doesn't go into masses of detail and pages of description of any action or things that might happen. He almost comes across quite nonchalant or quite casual in the way that he describes these horrifying things that are happening. And actually at points, especially towards the end of this book, when, you know, everything really starts to go down, he almost kind of doesn't say what happens. In fact, there's 2 points specifically, which I won't spoil at all, where it's very much left up to the reader's imagination to fill in the blanks, if you will, and to say what actually sort of happened, even though things are quite heavily implied. Like I mentioned, similar to Carrie, when the major events of the book start to happen, you start to realise what is going to be the kind of final third of the story. It just snowballs, and I'm a massive fan, as you can see, of Brandon Sanderson, and he's an author who really, when you get to the last third of a book, it's really difficult to stop. Even when you get to the end of a chapter, you're like, okay, I need to keep going. I need to keep going. Things are snowballing. I have to keep reading. And this is very much the case in Pet Sematary. You kind of, it's almost like a sort of, like a car crash, which, you know, for people that know the story is kind of a bit of a plot point in this, but you almost can't look away from it. You know, like if there's an accident that happens on the road, you kind of have to sort of slow down and have a look. As grim as that is, it has that sort of feel to it. So I want to give kind of my overall opinion of this story now, and I'm not going to spoil anything that specifically happens, but one or two of the plot points are kind of going to be not obvious as to what happens, but kind of giving away what I'm about to say. So if you don't want to know anything, if you don't know the story of Pet Sematary, you haven't read it, you haven't seen any of the adaptations of it, and you're interested in that, maybe stop the video now and go away and come back a bit later on. But I really, really enjoyed this book, and I used the word enjoyed quite oddly because of what happens in it, and it's so horrible, the ending of this book. The kind of spoiler thing that I want to say is that for me, I got through it, and I got to the end and I was like, man, what a good horror book, but that was horrible. And I think if you're someone who has young children, I think this might be a bit too much, or you might find this book much harder to get through than people that don't. I don't have any children, so I say luckily, but yeah, luckily definitely at the moment. But I think if I did, my reaction to this book might have been even more horrified. And actually, having read a couple of interviews with Stephen King after doing a bit of Googling after finishing the story, he seems to actually have distanced himself from it recently, and saying that actually it's quite a horrible book. I think it was his wife or somebody, when they first read it, they were like, this is a mean-spirited, horrible book. And I think he has kind of recently very much distanced himself from this story, and you can kind of see why. So there you have it, Pet Sematary. I mean, I don't read a lot of horror, so this is definitely a scarier book than Carrie was, and I definitely agree with those people on Reddit that I looked up when they said that it was Stephen King's scariest. It's definitely the scariest book that I've read so far. So if that's your thing, definitely pick it up. Love the sort of tagline that goes with this book, which is essentially Stephen King saying, you know, sometimes dead is better. Thank you so much for watching this review of Pet Sematary. If you enjoyed it, please go back and check my other video on Stephen King's first book, Carrie. I also have a video on the first Witcher book, The Last Wish by Andrzej Sapkowski. So please give that a check as well. And I will see you on the next episode of Chris's Fantasy Space.